Well, I'm going to back it up just a little bit. Mama and I went down to Fort Worth for the Cowtown picking party. The little sign, it says walking, but they're on their phone texting.
If you know anything about country music royalty, you know Reba McEntire stands at the very top, a legendary star who spent decades dominating the charts and television. Offstage, fans followed her 26-year marriage to her manager, Narvel Blackstock, which seemed like one of the strongest partnerships in Hollywood, until their sudden and unexpected divorce. But the real shockwave hit when Narvel moved on with a new partner who happened to be a close friend from Reba's own inner circle. After keeping her feelings private for years, Reba finally broke her silence on her ex-husband's new relationship. And her honest reaction left the entire music world completely off guard. So, what did Reba McEntire actually reveal about her ex-husband's new romance? Let's dive into what happened. Reba McEntire and Narvel Blackstock, the love story that slowly fell apart. For years, Reba McEntire and Narvel Blackstock looked like the kind of couple who had figured it all out. They built a life, a family, and an enormously successful career side by side, becoming so intertwined that it was difficult to tell where their marriage ended and their business partnership began. But beneath that picture of stability was a relationship that had slowly become far more complicated than fans ever realized. And by the time everything finally fell apart, the two had already spent decades building a life together. Their story actually began long before they became husband and wife. In 1980, Narvel joined Reba's band, becoming part of the team behind the country singer who was steadily making her way toward superstardom. At first, their connection was professional, but over the years, that working relationship grew deeper, and Narvel eventually became Reba's manager. Then, in 1989, everything changed. The couple tied the knot on a boat in Lake Tahoe, beginning what would become a 26-year marriage. By then, they had already spent nearly a decade working together, so marriage seemed like a natural extension of a partnership that was already deeply established. Narvel wasn't simply Reba's husband. He was the person helping guide her career, making decisions with her, and standing beside her as she became one of country music's biggest stars. And for a long time, that arrangement appeared to work. Reba has described Narvel as her biggest supporter and fan, especially during moments when she questioned whether her career still had a future. Before she signed her record deal with Nash Icon in 2014, Reba recalled that Narvel kept reassuring her that she would record again. She was unsure, but he wasn't. That kind of support mattered because Reba's career wasn't just a job. It was the life they had built together. They eventually welcomed their only son, Shelby Blackstock, while Reba also became a stepmother to Narvel's 3 children from his previous marriage. Their family became even more connected to the entertainment world, with Narvel's son, Brandon, eventually marrying Kelly Clarkson. For years, the arrangement seemed almost seamless. They worked together, raised a family, traveled together, and built an empire together. But there was also a side to their marriage that Reba would only speak about much later. Looking back, she admitted that business had become woven into almost every part of their relationship. Even their vacations could turn into conversations about work. What began as a professional partnership had gradually become the foundation of their marriage, and there was seemingly very little separation between the two. Still, from the outside, they remained a powerful team. That is what made the announcement on August 3, 2015, so surprising. After 26 years of marriage and 35 years of working together, Reba and Narvel revealed that they were separating. The divorce itself was described as amicable, and the two promised to continue supporting each other. But ending a marriage was only one part of the story. They still had a son together, a shared history stretching back decades, and a professional connection that had shaped Reba's entire career. And eventually, Reba would have to face something even more complicated. Watching the man who had once been her husband and closest professional partner begin a new chapter without her. From Oklahoma ranch girl to country music royalty. Long before Reba McEntire became one of country music's biggest names, she was a ranch girl growing up in Chalky, Oklahoma, surrounded by cattle, rodeos, and a family that understood hard work. Born in McAllister in 1955, Reba was the third of 4 children raised by Clark and Jacqueline McEntire. Her family had deep roots in rodeo, with her grandfather becoming a world champion steer roper in 1934, and her father later earning the same title 3 times. Life on the family ranch was not glamorous, and Reba and her siblings were expected to work just like everyone else. Before and after school, they helped with the cattle and whatever other chores needed to be done, giving Reba an early understanding of discipline that would later become one of the defining qualities of her career. But there was another side to the McEntire household, and that was music. Reba's mother, Jacqueline, had once dreamed of becoming a country singer herself, and although she eventually became a teacher, librarian, and secretary, she never let go of her love for music. She passed that passion on to her children, teaching them to sing harmonies during long car rides while the family traveled to their father's rodeo events. Reba began performing at school while she was still very young, and by the time she reached her teenage years, music had become more than something she enjoyed. She and her siblings formed a singing trio, eventually performing at local events, bars, and dance halls around Oklahoma. They even released a small regional single celebrating their famous grandfather, giving Reba one of her earliest tastes of what it meant to perform for an audience. And Reba wasn't just singing. She was the kind of kid who seemed determined to try everything. She played basketball, ran track, learned piano and guitar, and developed an interest in rodeo herself, eventually training as a barrel racer. That mixture of music, competition, and ranch life shaped the personality she would eventually bring to the stage. She knew how to work hard, entertain people, and hold her own in environments where nobody was going to hand her anything. Even after graduating from high school in 1973, she didn't immediately abandon that practical side of her life. She enrolled at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, studying elementary education with a minor in music, while continuing to help on the family ranch. At that point, a career in country music was still far from guaranteed. The turning point came in 1974, when her father encouraged her to sing the national anthem at the National Finals Rodeo in Oklahoma City. Through family friend and rodeo announcer Clem McSpadden, Reba got the opportunity, and that performance placed her in front of someone who would change the direction of her life. Country artist Red Steagall heard her sing and immediately noticed something different in her voice. Soon afterward, Reba performed for him at a hotel gathering, singing without an accompanying band, and Steagall became convinced that she had something special. When Reba's mother asked if he could help all 3 siblings secure a recording contract, Steagall gave her an answer she probably wasn't expecting. He couldn't take all of them, but he believed he could take Reba because there was something different about her. That was enough to get the young singer moving toward Nashville. Even then, Reba wasn't completely convinced that professional music was the path she wanted. On the drive to Nashville with her mother in 1975, she kept finding reasons to stop the trip. Jacqueline understood that her daughter was afraid, and one conversation changed everything. She reminded Reba that she didn't have to go if she didn't want to, but admitted that she was living her own dreams through her daughter. Reba decided to keep going. That decision opened the door to everything that followed. After recording a demonstration tape, Reba caught the attention of Glenn Keener at Polygram Mercury Records. The label was considering 2 female performers but could only sign 1, and when Keener presented the tapes to the company's Chicago headquarters, Reba's was the one selected. She signed her first recording contract in late 1975 and began recording professionally the following year. Her early releases didn't immediately turn her into a star. Her first single barely made an impact on the country charts, and the songs that followed performed modestly. But Reba kept moving. She toured, performed wherever she could, and learned how to command a stage even when the musicians accompanying her weren't familiar with country music. By the end of the 1970s, things were beginning to change. A collaboration with Jackie Ward gave Reba her first top 20 country hit. While her recordings began attracting more attention, she eventually built her own touring band, which included her sister Susie and brother Paque, and the family traveled from one show to another in a 3-car caravan carrying their equipment. It wasn't exactly the glamorous version of country stardom people might imagine, but it was building the foundation for something much bigger. Reba was learning not only how to sing, but how to survive the demanding life that came with being a professional performer. The real breakthrough came when Reba began fighting for control over the kind of music she wanted to make. Her early record company had pushed her toward a softer country pop sound, but Reba wasn't comfortable with it. She wanted something more traditional and closer to the country music she had grown up hearing. After moving to MCA Records, she began taking a much more active role in choosing her material. That decision proved crucial. The songs she selected connected with audiences, and by the mid-1980s, Reba was no longer struggling to establish herself. She was becoming one of the defining female voices in country music. Her breakthrough album in 1984 marked a major turning point. The record leaned into traditional country sounds at a time when the genre was changing, and its success helped establish Reba as an artist who could make classic country music feel fresh without losing its identity. She earned the Country Music Association's Female Vocalist of the Year award, and the momentum only grew from there. Her next projects continued to produce major hits, while her voice became instantly recognizable to country audiences. By 1986, she had reached another level entirely. Her album topped the country chart, earned platinum status, and brought her a Grammy, confirming that the ranch girl from Oklahoma had become a genuine country music powerhouse. What made Reba's rise so compelling was that success never came overnight. It was built through years of small performances, family support, long drives, difficult decisions, and a willingness to push back when the music being offered to her didn't feel right. She had grown up around people who understood that nothing worthwhile came without effort, and she carried that lesson with her into Nashville. By the time the 1980s were coming to a close, Reba McEntire wasn't simply another successful country singer. She had become a star with a distinct voice, a loyal audience, and the kind of career that was still only beginning to reach its full potential. The tragedy that changed Reba McEntire forever. By the early 1990s, Reba McEntire had reached a point in her career that few country singers ever experience. Her schedule was packed with concerts, her name was everywhere, and her touring band had become more than a group of musicians working behind a star. Many of them had been with Reba for years, traveling from one city to another and sharing the exhausting but exciting life that came with her success. Because the touring schedule had become so demanding, Reba and her crew increasingly relied on private planes to get from one performance to the next. It was a decision that seemed practical at the time, but one that would soon turn a routine weekend into one of the darkest moments of her life. In March 1991, Reba and her band were on the road for another stretch of performances. They had recently played dates in places including Alaska, Michigan, and Indiana before traveling to San Diego for a private performance for IBM. 2 planes were arranged to transport members of her touring crew, while Reba, her husband Narvel Blackstock, and her stylist were scheduled to travel separately the following day. Nothing about the evening suggested that anything was about to go terribly wrong. The planes took off, and Reba and Narvel went back to their nearby hotel, expecting to continue their journey the next morning. Then, in the early hours of March 16th, the phone rang. Narvel answered the call and learned that one of the planes carrying members of Reba's band had crashed. The aircraft had struck the side of Otay Mountain shortly after takeoff, killing everyone aboard. Among those who died were 8 members of Reba's touring band, including guitarists Chris Austin and Michael Thomas, keyboardists Kirk Capello and Joey Ciganero, vocalist Paula K. Evans, road manager Jim Hammond, bassist Terry Jackson, and drummer Anthony Saputo. The 2 pilots, Donald Holmes and Chris Hollinger, were also killed. For Reba, the news was devastating because these weren't strangers she had hired for a few shows. They were people she knew, worked with, and cared about deeply. Some had been part of her professional life for years, and the sudden loss felt like losing members of her own extended family. A statement released on her behalf captured just how deeply the tragedy had affected her. She was described as completely devastated and desperate to return to Nashville, where she could begin facing what had happened. The rest of the band had safely reached Nashville on the second plane, but the sense of relief could hardly have lasted. Reba and Narvel eventually returned on their own aircraft, carrying with them the reality that the people who had been beside Reba night after night were suddenly gone. The journey home became part of a terrible weekend that left Reba emotionally and physically exhausted. She later remembered just how overwhelming those days had been, and the loss would remain one of the defining tragedies of her life. Yet even in the middle of her grief, Reba still had to step back onto a stage. Just 9 days after the crash, she performed at the 63rd Academy Awards, singing a nominated song from Postcards from the Edge. It was an extraordinary thing to ask of anyone, especially someone who was still processing the sudden loss of so many people close to her. But Reba went through with the performance. Behind the scenes, friends in the country music community also stepped forward. Vince Gill and Dolly Parton offered their help as she began the difficult process of rebuilding her touring band. Music eventually became one of the ways Reba could make sense of what had happened. Later that year, she released For My Broken Heart, an album dedicated to the members of her road band who had died. Instead of trying to hide the pain, the record gave it somewhere to go. Its songs explored heartbreak, loneliness, loss, and the kind of emotional wounds that don't simply disappear because life is expected to continue. The title track became a #1 country hit, as did Is There Life Out There, while other songs on the album showed just how powerfully Reba could turn difficult emotions into music. The album climbed to #3 on the country chart and reached #13 on the Billboard 200, becoming her highest-charting album on that chart at the time. More importantly, it connected with listeners on a deeply personal level because the emotion behind it was impossible to separate from what Reba had just lived through. For My Broken Heart eventually sold more than 4 million copies in the United States, making it her best-selling album at that point in her career. But its success could never erase the reason it existed. Every achievement surrounding the record carried the memory of the people Reba had lost. And perhaps that is what made the album so powerful. Reba didn't simply sing about heartbreak as an idea. She was singing from a place of profound personal loss, using the one thing that had always been there for her, her voice, to carry the weight of everything she could no longer say to the people who had once stood beside her on the road. The men who came before Narvel Blackstock. Before Narvel Blackstock became the man most closely associated with Reba McEntire's personal and professional life, there was another marriage that began while the country star was still trying to figure out where her career was headed. Reba married Charlie Battles in 1976, when she was still a young singer working to establish herself in Nashville. Battles was a successful steer wrestling champion and rancher, and the two built their life around the Oklahoma ranch lifestyle Reba had known since childhood. At the time, her career was beginning to demand more of her attention, but she was still trying to balance performing with the responsibilities of ranch life. For a while, that arrangement seemed to work. Reba continued pursuing music, while also maintaining the life she and Charlie had created together. But as her career gained momentum, the differences between the two worlds became harder to ignore. Reba was spending more time on the road, performing and working toward the kind of career that would eventually make her one of country music's biggest stars. Their priorities and lifestyles gradually began moving in different directions, and after roughly 11 years together, the marriage came to an end in 1987. The divorce came at a particularly important moment in Reba's life. She wasn't simply leaving a marriage behind, she was also stepping into a new chapter, professionally. Her music career was gaining serious momentum, and she was beginning to take greater control over the direction of her work. Within just a couple of years, another man would enter her life who would become deeply connected to both her heart and her career. That man was Narvel Blackstock. Reba and Narvel married in 1989, and their relationship would last for 26 years. Unlike her first marriage, this one became intertwined with almost every part of Reba's professional world. Narvel had joined her band before eventually becoming her manager, and the two built an enormous career together. They welcomed their son Shelby, created a blended family, and spent decades working side by side. For many years, Narvel appeared to be the person who understood Reba's life better than almost anyone else. But after their divorce in 2015, Reba's romantic life entered another chapter. She eventually found companionship with Anthony Skeeter Lasuzzo, an American businessman and photographer she reportedly met through mutual friends while vacationing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Their relationship became public as the two began sharing glimpses of their travels and adventures together. And, for a time, it looked like Reba had found a quieter kind of happiness away from the pressures of her previous marriage. There was a noticeable difference in this relationship. Reba was no longer building a career alongside the person she was dating. Instead, she seemed to be enjoying the simple parts of companionship, traveling, spending time together, and creating memories without the same business connection that had defined so much of her marriage to Narvel. But even that relationship eventually came to an end. Reba confirmed in 2019 that she and Skeeter had broken up earlier that year. The split, however, did not appear to end their respect for each other. Reba explained that they had decided to go their separate ways, but continued talking and remained friends. It was another example of how Reba seemed determined to handle the endings in her personal life without turning them into public battles. And that would become a recurring theme in Reba's relationship history. Whether it was her first marriage ending as her career was taking off, her decades-long partnership with Narvel coming to an unexpected close, or her later relationship with Skeeter reaching its natural end, Reba's romantic journey was filled with chapters that often overlapped with major turning points in her life. Yet none of those relationships would prepare fans for what came after her divorce from Narvel, when the man who had spent decades beside her began building a new relationship that would make the aftermath of their split far more complicated. Reba McEntire finally breaks her silence on Narvel's new romance. When Reba McEntire and Narvel Blackstock announced their divorce in 2015, the news was already painful enough. After 26 years of marriage and more than 3 decades of building a career together, the end of their relationship marked the closing of one of the most enduring partnerships in country music. But then came another piece of news that made the situation even more complicated. Narvel had reportedly moved on with Laura Putty Stroud, a Nashville real estate agent who wasn't exactly a stranger to Reba. She had been part of their wider circle, had spent time with Reba, and had even appeared alongside her during some of the happier years of her marriage. And suddenly, the woman Reba had known as a friend was being linked romantically to the man who had been her husband for more than 2 decades. Reba and Narvel's story had begun long before the marriage ever fell apart. They first met in 1980 when Narvel joined Reba's band as a steel guitarist. What started as a professional relationship gradually developed into a friendship, and eventually into something much deeper. In 1989, the two married during a private ceremony on a boat in Lake Tahoe. Together, they welcomed their son, Shelby, while Reba also became a stepmother to Narvel's 3 children from his previous marriage. For years, the two seemed almost inseparable. Narvel eventually became Reba's manager, meaning their personal and professional lives became closely connected. They weren't simply husband and wife. They were business partners, parents, friends, and the people making major decisions about the future of Reba's career. By the time they announced their separation on August 3, 2015, they had spent 35 years working together. Still, the marriage had reached its end. In December of that year, Reba confirmed that the divorce had officially been finalized on October 28. But instead of publicly attacking Narvel or revealing private details about what had happened between them, she took a remarkably restrained approach. She told her fans that they were divorced but remained friends, making it clear that she wasn't interested in turning their breakup into a public feud. Behind that calm response, however, Reba later admitted that the divorce was not what she wanted. In 2016, she explained that she hadn't wanted the marriage to end and that adjusting to life after Narvel had been extremely difficult. But she also understood that sometimes a relationship reaches a point where staying together no longer makes either person happy. Reba's attitude was essentially that life was too short for 2 people to remain miserable, and she eventually decided that she had to accept what was happening and move forward. Then came the news about Laura Stroud. By January 2016, reports surfaced that Narvel was dating Stroud, and the relationship quickly became a topic of public interest. What made the story particularly striking wasn't simply that Narvel had found someone else so soon after the divorce. It was the fact that Stroud was reportedly someone who had been close to both Narvel and Reba. The connection was easy to see in old photographs and memories from before the divorce. In 2014, Reba and Stroud had attended a Katy Perry concert together, even posing for a playful photograph in colorful wigs. Stroud had also been around during Shelby's racing events, and Reba had publicly thanked her for taking photographs. At the time, there was nothing unusual about any of it. She was simply someone within Reba's circle. That made the later reports all the more surprising. Suddenly, a woman who had once appeared beside Reba as a friend was being described as Narvel's new girlfriend. Reports even suggested that the two were serious about one another and might eventually marry. For anyone watching from the outside, it was the kind of development that could have easily turned a private divorce into a very public drama. But Reba refused to give the public that drama. She never launched a public attack against Stroud, and she did not publicly dissect Narvel's new relationship. Instead, she continued to emphasize the importance of remaining civil with the man she had spent most of her adult life beside. People close to Reba described her as focused on her work and determined not to air her personal life in public. That decision said a lot about how she chose to handle the aftermath. There was also another reason Reba couldn't simply erase Narvel from her life. Their divorce did not mean she stopped being part of the family they had built together. She remained close to Shelby, and continued to maintain relationships with Narvel's other children, including Brandon Blackstock. Reba made it clear that divorce doesn't mean divorcing the children. In her view, those relationships deserve to survive regardless of what happened between the adults. And that may have been the biggest reason she kept her response so measured. Whatever Reba privately felt about Narvel moving on with someone from their shared circle, she understood that anger could easily damage relationships that still mattered to her. So instead of giving the public the explosive reaction many might have expected, she chose silence, dignity, and distance. Years later, that restraint remains one of the most striking parts of the story. Reba didn't need to publicly approve of Narvel's new romance, nor did she need to condemn it. Her actions suggested something much simpler. The marriage was over, but the history remained, and she wasn't willing to destroy everything they had built simply because their romantic relationship had ended. For a woman whose entire life had been lived so publicly, perhaps that was Reba McEntire's most honest response of all. What are your thoughts on the way Reba McEntire handled the news? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.